Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for keeping this critical markup on the calendar today. I know some people in Washington were calling this weather to be a big snowstorm, but I'm glad we're here talking about policies that are going to help families and small businesses across the country. I want to start out by thanking you, Chairman Smith, for your tireless work with Chairman Wyden over the last 14 months on this bipartisan tax package. You and your staff on the Tax Committee have done a great service for the country, no matter what the Wall Street Journal may have said about this bill. It shouldn't surprise anyone on this committee that one of the policies I'm most excited about is research and development expensing, which is a cornerstone of this tax package. I'd like to thank my colleague, Mr. Larson of Connecticut, for joining me in sponsoring the R&D expensing legislation for the past few Congresses. Without our partnership, I'm sure that this moment would not be possible. Our bill garnered so much bipartisan support, it became the most co-sponsored piece of tax legislation in this Congress. I've shared these stats before, but it's worth talking about them again today. Our main competitor, China, has seen its R&D investments increase by 400% in just 2 decades. While United States' share of global R&D investment in 2019 dropped to 30%, China's share grew to 24%. Up from 15% in 2009, a jump of nearly 10 percentage points in 10 years. They achieved this impressive growth by implementing a deduction of up to 200% on eligible R&D investments. And since amortization took effect 2 short years ago, the growth rate of R&D spending has slowed dramatically from 6.6% on average over the previous 5 years to less than 0.5% over the last 12 months. But this doesn't just impact the small businesses across the country, it really affects workers as well. As companies spend far less on R&D, the sector is down by more than 14,000 jobs. 3/4 of research and development spending is on wages and salaries, making R&D amortization primarily a jobs issue. My home state of Kansas is full of pioneers and innovators. We have a drive to invent and invest in new ideas and new technology. We're the air capital of the world because folks like Lloyd Stearman and Ollie Van Beach found our wide open spaces and hard-working spirit conducive to advancing air travel. Kansans today are making advancements in healthcare, agriculture, manufacturing, and tech, just to name a few. It should also be noted that this bill takes a holistic view of the R&D provision. Under this legislation, we allow businesses that operate in U.S. territories to immediately deduct R&D expenses incurred in those jurisdictions. This was especially important as we continue to push back against the OECD and the ill-conceived global minimum tax. Correcting this tax code issue is not just about making the tax code fair for investors and innovators, but it's critical for boosting our economy and making the United States competitive. Each one of us in this room have constituents in our home districts who will benefit from us passing the Tax Relief in American Families and Workers Act, and specifically the R&D expensing. I realize some Americans may not be familiar with the nuances of this part of our tax code, but simply put, Republicans and Democrats agree that this is going to boost our economy and our workforce. I want to again thank Chairman Smith for his work in putting this tax package together. I know in divided government we can be especially challenging, but consider the facts that one of the key pieces I just discussed is already supported by nearly half of both parties through co-sponsorship. It provides a great starting point for us to bring other tax elements together which will benefit families and workers. It's my hope that this committee will continue to work together, using this bill as an example of working together in a bipartisan, bicameral manner. I believe we can do so on the Financing on Energy Futures Act, which I introduced with Mr. Thompson, the Help Independent Tracks Succeed Act, or HITS Act, which I co-lead with Ms. Sanchez, and with pushing back on OECD's global minimum tax scheme. The Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act is a win for Kansans and all Americans. For example, the child tax credit, which was expanded in the Republican Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, is now fully indexed for inflation thanks to this bill. And we know how bad inflation is the last 3 years. And I'm so pleased that our work together on R&D expensing, which is one of the highlights of this bill, and coupled with other tax provisions that will benefit the U.S. economy, small businesses, innovators, families, and everyday Americans. I look forward to voting yes on this legislation. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.